All right, it's Yalak here again with another lesson in the New Testament is Fake series. I want to do a lesson here today about speaking in tongues. I want to make this a very simple lesson, and I know some people are a bit concerned about my explanation of the speaking in tongues. I have an explanation for tongues speaking on the day of Pentecost that I haven't heard anyone say before, and I have had a couple of people, they're asking questions about it. They're asking their teachers, and they're talking to me about it as well. People are wondering. I was surprised to understand that in the Israelite circles, some people believe that the tongues really happen the way that the Christians teach it in the Christian religion. I can understand the Christians thinking that because the Christians just, they just go with that. But I was a bit surprised that the Israelites still carry that belief. And that just goes in line anyway with my teachings in the New Testament, because some things we just haven't broken off from enough. But I realize that the Most High is just waking up more and more people to teach about this New Testament deception, and it's helping us to slowly drop off some of these things. So more teaching needs to be done where this speaking in tongues is concerned. When I just came into this Israelite knowledge by leaving the Christian church, I heard Israelite teachings that the New Testament Day of Pentecost speaking in tongues was right, and that it's still going on. In some places it's still happening. But having turned away from the New Testament, I could start to see that something was wrong with that. So I've already taught, and the questions are coming back to me now. People are concerned, and people are asking their teachers as well. And so clever ways are being sought after to explain what this tongue speaking was. And I can see that the way that it is being done is just out of an effort to show that the belief in Jesus or Yahushua, Yahawashai, this New Testament Messiah, is correct. They're trying to save the New Testament. They're trying to save Jesus. And both of those are incorrect and have nothing to do with the Creator / the God of Israel. Nothing. So they're saying here that they were speaking in tongues of the language that they had from birth, that they were basically born speaking in their house, you could say. But that is not the answer, and the text does not actually allow for that. I'm going to read from Acts chapter 2, and I'm going to read actually 17 verses, which I don't normally read from the New Testament. And I never read 17 verses either, but I'll just go ahead and read these 17 verses so, we can just get the stuff fresh in our mind of what happened. Actually, it's just going to play from an audio Bible on my phone. I'm going to let you hear what happens, and I'm going to explain to you one more time that the tongues there never came from the Creator, never came from the Most High. And I'm also going to show that the teaching that's out there, cleverly made up, that they were speaking in their own tongue, that they were born in their house or in their land, is what really happened. That is also not true, because the text does not show that. The text actually gives information to show that that is not correct. And so then what we'd be left with is a text in Acts chapter 2 that's saying that the Spirit gave some supernatural tongues. Listen to this now, Acts chapter 2, verse 1 to 17.
Chapter 2. And when the day of Pentecost was fully come, they were all with one accord in one place. And suddenly there came a sound from heaven as of a rushing mighty wind, and it filled all the house where they were sitting. And there appeared unto them cloven tongues like as of fire, and it sat upon each of them. And they were all filled with the Holy Ghost, and began to speak with other tongues as the Spirit gave them utterance. And there were dwelling in Jerusalem Jews, devout that he had received unto heaven. Now when this was noised abroad, the multitude came together, and were confounded, because that every man heard them speak in his own language. And they were all amazed and marveled, saying one to another, Behold, are not all these which speak Galileans? And how hear we every man in our own tongue, wherein we were born? Elamites and the dwellers in Mesopotamia and in Judea and Cappadocia, in Pontus and Asia, Phrygia and Pamphylia in Egypt, and in the parts of Libya about Cyrene, and strangers of Rome, Jews and proselytes, Greeks and Arabians, we do hear them speak in our tongues the wonderful works of God. And they were all amazed and were in doubt, saying one to another, What meaneth this? Others mocking said, These men are full of new wine. But Peter, standing up with the 11, lifted up his voice and said unto them, Ye men of Judea, and all ye that dwell at Jerusalem, be this known unto you, and hearken to my words. For these are not drunken, as ye suppose, seeing it is but the third hour of the day. But this is that which was spoken by the prophet Joel. And it shall come to pass in the last days, saith God, I will pour out of my Spirit upon all flesh. And your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams.
All right, so that's verse 17 that it stopped at right there. Now, if I was in like a classroom setting, I would go into the different areas where they're coming from, but that would take some more time, so I don't want to do it here. But at least I will say, if you look at the list of the places where these men are coming from, these devout men, it tells the places where they're coming from, like it says Parthians and Medes and so on. And then it breaks. So you would think, according to the New Testament teaching, you would think that these are Jews, as they put it there, or basically people from Judah that were scattered in these different places. So it gives the places, but then it breaks from the places, and then it says, and strangers of Rome. Now, I know the Israelite teacher is going to say those strangers are Israelites as well. But notice here that because they make it so every time they see strangers or Gentiles in the New Testament, they say it's only Israel. That is just completely silly. The same way you can't see Gentiles in the Old Testament and say that it's always Gentiles every time it says it in the Old Testament. So the desperate attempt to say that strangers here are the same Israelites. It's listing the different places to show where the people from Judah are coming from. Then it breaks to tell you there are strangers of Rome as well. So you're talking about a different group of people who are not from Judah, who are not Israelites. And then to further show that it goes on to say Jews, in other words, Judah, and proselytes. And when you deal with proselytes, you're going to deal with people who normally would think that they're converted, right? But really here, since it says Jews and proselytes, it's telling you that there are some people who are not Jews or are not of Judah, who were scattered, but are some other people who decided to side with the people of Judah in terms of their belief. So they are Gentiles, like physical, literal Gentiles. All right? Because if they were not, there would have been no need to point out that they were, or in addition to all these people from these different places, that they were strangers of Rome, and they were also Jews, and they were also proselytes. They're telling you there are some differences among these people in terms of their identity. All right, their spiritual identity as well, because it says Judahites and proselytes. And then after it breaks and it goes into the strangers and the Jews and the proselytes, then it gets back to what it was talking about before, which is listing the places where these same Judahites came from. And it goes back on now to say Cretes and Arabians. So if you take out the part about strangers and of Rome and Jews and proselytes, it could read something like this. Phrygia and Pamphylia in Egypt and in the parts of Libya about Cyrene, Cretes and Arabians. You see that? But it stopped to slip in these other places, these other people groups, because they're telling you there are some other people groups, not just Israelites. So then, when I consider the text from 1 to 17 that was just read, I would then be left to think, as anyone reading the Bible that has just some simple common sense, that the Holy Ghost fell on that day even upon people who were not Israelites. You see that? So Holy Ghost is dropped on them like that, just so easily. I mean, they never kept a lick of one commandment in their life or never cared of it and so on. They just bam, 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 just getting the Holy Ghost at it. I mean, I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but it just seems a little bit strange to me. It just seems kind of odd to me. Just like we're teaching now, all these changes are not going to be saved in the end. They're not going to come out to our kingdom. They're going to be serving and so on. But the restoration is for Israel because we're the ones who were scattered. So you're telling me now we got all this punishment of being scattered back then and kicked out of the land, Romans ruling over us and so on. We're in different lands. And the Holy Ghost is going to drop from the Father. And he's just going to drop it on all kinds of Gentiles as well. It's like we don't get to be treated any special, like, no, back off, hold off a little bit. Gentiles, if you want Holy Ghost, you have to wait because I'm doing this for my people. Just like Isaiah 11 and 12 is showing that Israelites are going to be gathered. These are my people that I'm going to give salvation to. Wouldn't he have been doing something so great on this day to show that this is just about Israel, to show them as being set apart and singled out from everybody else? But no, instead, Gentiles are getting the Holy Ghost just bam, just like everybody else on the day of Pentecost. That's a Hebrew. The teaching that I'm concerned with now, that I want to clear up, is saying that the Holy Ghost actually fell. What they heard them speaking in, when it says every man is speaking in our own tongue wherein we were born, is a language that they were speaking because they had their own language from the different lands that they were living in. So they were born in these different places, and whatever language was spoken in that land that they were living in, they were born into that house and they were speaking that language as well. So that language of birth makes them have now two languages. So they're saying people are hearing them speaking in these languages, everybody speaking in the languages in which they were born in their own house, in their lands. So their local language where they grew up. Now, that has to be incorrect. And that's why I'm making this video. Because the text now, if you look at it some more, one or two things here show a problem with that knocks that down, really does. Verse 12 says, and they were all amazed and were in doubt, saying to one to another, what meaneth this? And they're mocking and so on, saying they're full of new wine. Peter's saying, hey, they aren't drunk. Now, if somebody is speaking in the language in which you were born, why are you so amazed? Why? If you come into this Israelite truth, you speak English and then you go, because you were born speaking English in your house, pretty much, and then you go, you say, I want to learn more about Torah and so on. You go learn Hebrew. It takes you a while. You learn the Hebrew. And when you gather together, you're speaking in the Hebrew and you're talking, you're discussing stuff with others who speak Hebrew there or whatever. Somebody comes in who already knows you and all the people there. And at certain points, you're speaking English as well. When you're discussing in the Hebrew, they understand that because you learned the Hebrew to study the text, to study Torah. But then they hear you slipping some English here and there for the people in the room who don't know the Hebrew. The person who already knows you, when they hear you speaking English, are they going to be amazed like they were amazed here in Acts chapter 2? They were all amazed and they were in doubt and so on. They're mocking, oh, they've got new wine, until Peter has to defend them. It's strange. You're not going to be amazed that the person is speaking English because that's the tongue they were born speaking in their house where they grew up in America. You see that? How come we hear people speaking English? Because they were born speaking English. Now, and so this is what's going on here. So the language that they were born speaking, nobody should have been amazed at it. Like the text is saying that they were amazed. How do we hear them speaking all these various or different languages wherein we were born? Right? Something is wrong with the text. Right? And Peter is defending them, saying, you're not drunk as you suppose, because it's too early. It's the third hour of the day. It's too early. So the bars wouldn't be open yet. Nobody's buying all this rum and all that stuff for people to get drunk. But now he's saying this is actually a fulfillment. And he mentions the prophet Joel. So you see another problem here is that it could not be the language that each person was speaking in. Because if that's the case, it would not then have been a supernatural kind of an act. So the text is clearly letting us know that Peter is saying this is a fulfillment of prophecy where Joel said a supernatural thing will happen, where the Spirit's going to pour it and you're going to speak in this so-called language, heavenly language. that means that if it's an outpouring of a special move of the Spirit from the Most High, then it's clearly seen on that day as something supernatural. Now, do you need supernatural ability to speak English when you were born speaking English? Are you amazed at anyone having supernatural ability to speak English in your presence? No, because you just expect people to be speaking English in all the different provinces or states around you. So if they come to where you are at, it's normal. So you see, it's just it is a lot of confusion in the New Testament, and desperate attempts are being made to keep the New Testament from going down, because the Most High is raising up people more and more and more and more to chip away at the New Testament teachings, and it's going down. I am meeting people more and more who are expressing their concerns about the deception in the New Testament. People that you'd have never thought that they would have been questioning this. And some of them can't leave their church or their camp because they are afraid. But at least they're starting to take it on. And in their heart, they're starting to believe. But when the heart becomes free, they're going to finally make that choice. But they already know it inside. Because the New Testament lies are being chipped away by the Most High. And He's raising up one more of us, one after another, to come out and start teaching and speaking these things as we see it and as we find it out. And it's only going to keep growing. No one needs supernatural ability to speak the language wherein they were born. Nobody needs that. And look at this too. Are not all these that speak Galilean? If you're saying that they were speaking in the language of the hearers supernaturally, I mean, why didn't they just all speak Galilean since the people knew Galilean? Because if they're saying, are not all these that speak Galilean, that means they have some understanding of that language then. So why don't they just all speak in a common language? Why go through all this extra supernatural ability to speak some other language that not everybody knows, but only certain people know? Why not just speak the common language that most or all the people will know? Because to speak in all these different languages does not actually make the Israelite who knows Torah feel any more impressed than a false prophet come and telling you that you should bow down and worship a bull. Because an Israelite would know that you can't come with fancy tongues to let me feel that God is moving, or that this is a prophecy being fulfilled from Joel. Because if a prophecy is being fulfilled from Joel, the Israelite who has his head screwed on will know that Torah is supposed to be all up in here for me to gravitate toward this. The Israelite is going to look for Torah commandments, not tongues of different languages or ability to speak in other languages. Nowhere in Torah does it show that ability to speak in other language on the spur of the moment shows that one is being reunited with the God of Israel. No one. No Israelite's going to just approach it like that. So this whole New Testament stuff, it's very weak, it's very shallow. The legs are coming off.